open our Bibles to Exodus 18 and look at this section of Scripture together. The very first verse says, "Now Jethro, the priest of Midian." Now Midian was a group of people, an area east of the Gulf of Aqaba that was on the east side of the Sinai Peninsula, south of Canaan, south of the Moabites, really bordered by Arabia on the other side. And so, and this was really a barren part of land with only some minor relief in places where you see some water, but pretty amazing place. You see, the Midianites were treated as enemies of Israel for the most part. Most of that we'll see later, particularly when the Midianites cause a problem with their idol worship and leading the Israelites into that, sort of by the coaching of Balaam towards Balak, and he uses the Midianites to really wreak havoc within the Israelites. So we'll see that before too long in these passages. But it's fascinating because Midian is where Moses went to when he left Egypt. This is where he met his wife, and so this is his father-in-law Jethro, who's a priest of Midian. So you wonder, what kind of priest was he? Was he a priest of these other gods initially? And so keep that in mind as we go through this. This man was not an Israelite. He was a pagan and really possibly a priest to false gods, to other gods. And so now Jethro, the priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moses, heard of everything God had done for Moses and for his people Israel, and now the Lord had brought Israel, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. And after Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her and her two sons. One was named Gershom, for Moses said, "I have become a foreigner in a foreign land," and the other was named Eleazar, for he said, "My father's God is my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh." Back in Exodus 4, we saw that strange little passage of Scripture where Moses and Aaron were on their way to Egypt with, he had his wife and Gershom. Moses had his wife and Gershom with him, and then suddenly you see this little passage of Scripture that says the Lord was going to kill him, and that she pulled her flint knife and she circumcised Gershom, and she took the foreskin and put it on the feet of Moses and called him the bridegroom of blood. And so you can go back in this grouping of videos and look at that. Look at Exodus 4 and where I talked about that. But it's from there that it appears that she turned back and she didn't go to Egypt with him. And she took Gershom, who was probably in no shape to be traveling, and she took him and went back. And so this sort of connects that together with that part where after Moses sent away his wife Zipporah, verse 2, his father-in-law Jethro received her and the two sons. And one son was Gershom, the other Eleazar, verse 5. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wives, came to him in the wilderness where he was camped near the mountain of God. So again, this is sort of some of the evidence they might look to and say, because Midian was on the east side of the Sinai Peninsula, on the east side of the Gulf, that that's why they believe that the mountain of God was probably on the east side, and it's evidence for that Jabal Allah's site, which has some fascinating evidence. Verse 6: Jethro had sent sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you and your wife and 2 sons. And so Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they greeted each other and then went into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships they had met along the way and how the Lord had saved them. So it's kind of a fascinating reunion. You think about it in our context. The family was separated for some period of time, and you would think that that his kids and his wife would be, oh, Moses, we missed you so much, and Daddy, and there'd be hugs, and it really doesn't portray that, but it's more of this acting in honor as Jethro sees everything is done, and he's looking at Moses saying, this is a different person than the one that left. He's seeing God has made him a leader and seeing all that he's done in his life. So he's seeing something, but it's interesting because the family is really not mentioned that much, as if it were a reunion. But it's more along the context of his father-in-law. And they sit down and he tells him that everything God did, he brought these plagues, and there was the blood, and then, there was lice, and then the flies, and there was all of these things happen. And then he came down to the last day when he killed all of the firstborn, but we wasn't affected by it because we took a Passover lamb. And so he's telling all of this. Imagine telling him, then we went to the sea. We were up against the sea. God said, stretch out your hand. And then, this wind began to blow, and all of a sudden a wall of water. And you imagine telling his father-in-law this story, and you can imagine his eyebrows going up as he told him this. And oh yeah, it's true, it really happened. And the rock, water coming from the rock. He gives him all of these details. And in verse 9, Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things. That word delighted, by the way, is sort of a really rare word in the Old Testament. It's interesting that it is rare that there would be a word placed there that is not used very often. So Jethro being this, and I look at this rarity as Jethro being this sort of pagan, a Midianite, a gentile that worships other gods. He was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. He doesn't know Israel from anything else. He doesn't know this group of people. He has no connection with them in any way other than Moses. Verse 10, he said, praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh. So praise be to the Lord. Praise be to the Lord God that would, for all these good things. Here is a Midianite priest, a priest of apparently other gods, a Gentile, has no connection with the Israelites, no direct connection, hearing about all of the good things that the Lord has done, and he's suddenly praising the Lord. And so this is fascinating, because this is exactly what God said would happen, that they would be a people that he would be known by his name, by his actions, that these things that he was doing would go out so that they may know, so everyone may know that he was Lord. And so this is exactly what's happened by these things, by these actions that the Lord had done in Egypt and during the Exodus, that this Midianite priest knew that he was the Lord, that Yahweh was the Lord. It says, praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. And so for anybody to be rescued at the hand of the Egyptians was a big deal because of to be rescued at the hands of from the Egyptians, a big deal because the Egyptians were like the world superpower at that time. And I forgot to scroll this up for you. And so Jethro was delighted to hear about those things, rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. And he said, praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians, Pharaoh, who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods. That's a big statement from Jethro. This is a pretty big deal. This is pretty amazing. Now I know that the Lord, that Yahweh, is greater than all other gods. Suddenly it's like saying, I'm not a priest of those other gods anymore. And that he is looking at Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, as God. For he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly. And so he's learning by the actions of God. He's learning by God's dealings with his people of God's faithfulness, of his love, and of his mercy. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. This is like a fellowship offering. It's a burnt offering, and it's having this fellowship. It's an act of worship of Jethro saying, I know that he is God, and I see that he's greater than all other gods. And he brings an offering and worships him with this offering. He does so in the presence of all of Moses, Aaron, and these elders, and has fellowship with them, and they all worship together. And this is like Jethro submitting to God, to taking part in this worship and becoming as if he were to an Israelite, and to join himself with them. It's pretty interesting. So verse 13 then, the next day Moses took the seat to serve as judge to all the people, and they stood around him from evening till morning. I love this passage. Here is people that grumble at the drop of a hat, who brought charges to Moses, who think he brought them out to the desert to see them all die, and they're all going to be killed, and it's just this horrible circumstance, and on, right? And the next day Moses is sitting to serve them as judge. He sits all day. Imagine 2 million people in the desert, camped out with nothing to do. Every dispute amongst those people was brought to Moses. The people that were disputing would stand in line together and then come before Moses. So you can imagine there was probably all kinds of grumbling and fighting and carry it on. And they would come before Moses, and he would say, God said this. God, said you shouldn't do this, and you are wrong, and you need to, apologize, forgive, pay back, whatever the case may be. And he sits as judge amongst the people. And so verse 14, can you imagine doing that all day with these grumbling people all day, every day? What a long day. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, what is this you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone as judge while all those people stand around you from morning till evening? Moses answered, because the people come to me to seek God's will. And so he felt justified. He felt right. He was doing what he knew how to do, that he was wanting to bring them God's will, and the people were seeking God's will, and he wanted to deliver that to them. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. So this is the most important part, is he is teaching them God's decrees and instructions. So somebody comes to them with a dispute. He says, well, this was what God would decree. These are the instructions for God upon your life. And he gives them the boundaries of morality, of ethics, of whatever it may be. And he's teaching them those things, God's ways. Verse 17, Moses' father-in-law replied, what you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. You can imagine you and these people coming to you. There was probably a lot of the same people. There was probably a lot of them that showed up repeatedly, people that always have problems with other people that have problems getting along. He said, you and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you, and you cannot handle it alone. So you see the wisdom of this man already in speaking to Moses, who was brought to this place by God, acting on God's stead, but he uses someone like this pagan priest, like this man that just came to know the Lord. He's using him, this Gentile, to come and speak wisdom into Moses' life. And it was interesting that we can see that play out that way, that sometimes God's counsel and his wisdom comes from strange places. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't or can't listen when it comes from a place that's at least less likely than where we think it should come from. A lot of times we put ourselves in those situations where we think that we've got those answers. We figured that out. We don't need that counsel, and we come to find out that we should have listened to some of that godly counsel that came from places we didn't expect. He says, listen now to me, verse 19, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you, which is Jethro's way of saying, I'm going to give you some advice, take it or leave it, do what you want with it. Obviously, he could do just that. He said, you must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them the decrees and instructions, and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. So this is taking a little bit more a proactive approach. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him, but also teach them his decrees and instructions, not after they have a dispute, or only when they have a dispute, only when they come to them and have sinned or messed something up. Then you teach him, but he's being more proactive and saying, teach them who God is, teach him the instructions and decrees that God gives, and show them how to live, and thereby reduce all of these disputes and everything. And so that they will know how to behave. They in their knowing how to behave also sets the boundaries so that they are without excuse when there is dispute. And then he says, select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy, men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And so the idea is that you're gonna find men within this to serve, to also represent and do similar things, but they want to be the right men. And so to be the right men is they have to be capable of this, capable of being judicious, and they have to obviously know God's decrees and God's way of life, and they have to be trustworthy, and in being trustworthy, they should also be people that hate dishonest gain, that they couldn't be as a judge and somehow be bribable, so that whoever has the most money and influence could get a ruling for their favor. That sounds like our days, doesn't it? But that they were to be just and hate dishonest gain, and then choose these good men and let them be judges. This is what we are supposed to do as a nation that we've failed so miserably at, and evidence is all over the place. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. So all the really hard cases, the things that we don't know what God says, for sure from the instructions, decrees, that let's take this to Moses and let him speak to us of what God would have us do. And the simpler cases, then they can just decide for themselves. They will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. And if you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain of all, and all these people will go home satisfied, which is a big statement, right? That these two mean people are going to go home satisfied. These grumblers, these backbiters, these hard-hearted, stiff-necked people are all going to go home satisfied. Fat chance. And so, and again, you see that the hearts of men haven't changed over the years, and that we are completely capable of much the same thing. And so there's not too many days that everybody goes home completely satisfied. And that's our nature. That's just the sin that we bear in the flesh, and that comes out in strange ways. And we are called to control that, and called not to walk in that, but we don't do very good at it a lot of times. Moses listened to his father-in-law, and he did everything he said. Chose capable men from all Israel, made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens. They served as judges for the people at all times, and the difficult cases they brought to Moses. But the simple ones, they decided for themselves. And then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country of Midian. What a fascinating passage that God would use his father-in-law, this Gentile, at least formerly, maybe we could say formerly pagan priest, who now had given up chasing other gods and looked at Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, as the only God worthy of all praise, and he praised him and offered sacrifices to him. And God uses him to bring us advice to Moses to operate more efficiently, and this was good advice, and Moses recognized it as good advice and put it into play, and began to teach the people the things of God. So you see in the last several chapters, since the Exodus, you see God is bringing these people knowledge of him through difficulties, through war with the Amalekites, difficulties through what we'd say maybe suffering because they didn't have water, going through difficult times. We see that he is bringing knowledge of God through other people, even a Gentile father-in-law. And so in many ways, we see all the different ways God is directing, guiding, and showing his grace upon these people, and bringing his knowledge of himself to them, of his expectations of them, and bringing his way of life to them in many ways. And so this is, beginning to lead us towards the giving of the law. And, after chapter 19, we go right into the giving of the law. And so this is almost like this preparation is going on, that God is educating them, showing them, beginning to set the boundaries of life and morality and ethics. And this is what it looks like from God's viewpoint, that he is going to call his people to live with him. And so he does it in many different ways. He still does. He still does that for us. And again, we can even look at these Old Testament things, and Paul says these are examples for us that we can learn from these very things. And so even in our own life, we can see that God uses many different ways, many things to speak into our life. And maybe it's even a YouTube video that you stumbled across. So I hope that through this, that maybe I was able to bring the Bible to life for you, that you might learn from these examples, that God might speak to you through this video, and to God be the glory. Thanks for joining me, and hit the subscribe button if you would, and we'll keep bringing videos. Thank you.